Hey guys, it's spring in northwestern Ontario and my father has asked me to get his rototiller ready so that he can put his garden in. Follow along while we take a peek at it, make sure there's nothing wrong. Maybe we'll throw a little bit of shell rotella in the crankcase, make sure that it's going to run good for him. If everything goes as expected with this one, we have another little project going here. My father picked this up a couple of years ago. Sears Craftsman. Hasn't run in a number of years. We're going to see if we can get this thing fired up and running. Follow along. Hopefully we can get both these machines running today. What we have here is an old, I believe it's a Ford brand rototiller. Unfortunately, I believe it was a Briggs motor was on it. Probably an old flathead. Blew up. Put a connecting rod out through the side of the block a number of years ago. And what we ended up with is a Ducar. It's a Honda clone, but this is the same basic, 212cc, thereabouts, 6.5 horse, same as the Harbor Freight Predator 212 or any of the other Honda clones. Ducar is actually a manufacturer of these motors, and there's several of them, but the Ducar tend to be a slightly better quality than the straight knockoff clones. So let's check the oil, see where we're at. I think we'll throw some fresh in it once we get it fired up and warmed up a little bit. Looks like we're midpoint on the dipstick. That should be good enough. This motor would have splash oil. It doesn't have a pressure oil system, so having the right amount of oil in the crankcase is kind of important. Our switch is on. I think this should be easy to start because the fuel is turned off. Over here, I don't know how well this will show up for you guys, kind of in shadow. I'm going to fuel shut off, so we'll put the fuel on, choke on, and here's our throttle. We'll set it up a little bit. Let me give it a tug or two. Let me put you on a stand, and that way you're not shaking around while I'm trying to start it. Well, the clutch is apparently stuck engaged. It doesn't seem to be releasing, and the throttle that's up on the handlebar does not appear to be hooked up. That would be the throttle right there. That is not really surprising. If we look down in here, this arm, you can see that's the throttle, and that should be hooked up in there somehow. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like we've got the mounting for it handy. Let me pull the rest of this air filter off, and then we'll take a look and see if there's a way to hook that throttle cable up. I got the two screws that hold this bottom cover for the air filter out, and there's our throttle assembly. This screw gives you a kind of a max stop, and here is where the throttle cable should attach. Something along those lines right there. Unfortunately, this motor didn't come with a hold down clamp. I did find a 12-pack of them on Amazon, and I've ordered that in, so we'll be able to get this cable up and running. Next item on the list is we want to check and see why the tines are turning even when the clutch lever isn't pulled, and that's over on the other side. Use the great big, I think it's a number 3 Phillips. Well, the belt's not in the best of shape, but it doesn't look like it's about to fail. the outlet of the motor. This lever is attached to the handlebar and pulls tension on the belt, and this is the drive pulley for the tines through this gearbox here. I don't see any major problems. There's no reason why the tines shouldn't slip when the clutch lever is not engaged, but it certainly was trying to roll forward. And I don't think we necessarily need to do it today, but probably we should look at getting a new belt for that for maybe next year. But I think we'll make do with what we've got for this year. The garden's not that big anyways. I don't know how well it shows up for you guys, but there is some dampness here at the lower part of the gearbox. And I don't know that we necessarily want to be pursuing replacing seals. As I say, the garden's not very big. This thing only has to run for about an hour. But we do want to make sure that the gearbox has plenty of oil in it. Over on this side, you can see the fill plug. I'm going to grab a wrench. We'll open that fill plug up and make sure that we've got lots of gear oil in it. Our transmission drain plug is down here. I'll give it a quick little pull, make sure that we've got gear oil. That's a fairly long plug for such a small transmission. Used up the last of the gear oil, but it's not quite up to the opening, but it's pretty close. It will do for gardening for this year. Cap back in. Now we're going to drain the oil out of the engine. It didn't look too bad. I don't know that this has had all that many hours on it since the engine was replaced, but it's a good idea to throw some fresh stuff in. These engines have a habit of doing what we call making metal for the first couple hours till they get broken in, and I don't know if this has ever had an oil change since it was broken in, so we'll be extra nice to it and give it a drink of Rotella T4. Yeah, the engine's oil's black enough, worthwhile doing. I'll throw a link down in the description of a replacement oil dipstick. It's aluminum turned on a lathe, and then it's got a rare earth magnet stuck in the end that will actually collect any shavings that the motor produces. I prefer to use those rather than this, and probably order one of those in for this motor. I didn't run this engine long enough to warm it up, so the oil is a little on the stiff side. It's not really flowing out of that engine all that well. Probably would have been a good idea to run it a little bit longer, but we're kind of in an enclosed space here, and I didn't want to stink us out with exhaust. We could put it outside and run it, but it is kind of rainy today, so we'll just do it the difficult way with the stiff oil. That's got our oil drained out of there, no more coming out. Put the plug back in. We give the funnel a little squirt of the cleaner, get any sawdust, residual oil out of it, and we'll put the good stuff in. Can't hold it. Woohoo! A little too much. Yeah, we're full. Got a little carried away. These engines hold about a liter, and of course it's hard to judge when you're filling out of a 1 gallon container just how much you've got in it. Okay, we're up at the top of the dipstick, right where we want it. I mentioned earlier that these engines use splash oil. And what that is, on the bottom of the connecting rod that goes from the crankshaft up into the piston is a little kind of a dipper, like a finger that sticks out, and every rotation of the crankshaft it dips into the oil and sprays it all over the inside of the case, and that's the lubrication that you get on the back side of the cylinder and also on the bearings. It works, it's simple, it's reliable for these small engines. The only trick to it is you need to make sure you've got enough oil in the bottom of the crankcase so that the dipper can make good connection. When you're modifying this style of engine, replacing it with high performance parts, one of the first things they recommend you do is changing to a billet connecting rod that has a drilled dipper. First of all, it would be wider, and also it has a whole passage drilled into it so that it actually forces oil up into the bearing rather than relying on purely splash oil. But I think we've got everything done that we want to do on this machine. I'll put it together and then we can set it aside and take a look at number 2. Guys, I think we're going to end this one here. The Craftsman kind of got a little more involved than I was expecting it to be, and had to order in a few parts for it. But I think we're going to make it its own video. Thanks a lot for stopping by. If you got this far, can you throw me one of those thumb up like button things, and maybe consider subscribing, ring the bell icon, that kind of thing. And we'll catch you guys in the next mess. Bye for now.